Previously on Paratopia.
Goodbye, Jeff.
Yep. And that's the story of how Jeff became the smoke monster in episode 70.
Wait, what? How did I...
Time travel.
Time travel.
Time travel.
How?
Time travel.
How the fuck does
Traveling
time
through
travel...
time. Time travel.
What? What are you... Wait a minute. What? Was that extraterrestrial?
I feel like I should feel a lot worse than I do after that crash. But, all things considered, a little creaky, but I'm alright. Anyway, Jeff Ritzman, where are you? Drowning. What's this? Oh, a letter from a listener. How fortuitous that washed right up into my hands and sounded crisp as though it wasn't at all wet in an ocean. Well, never mind continuity. Let's read it. It says here, "Hi, Jeremy." It's even addressed to me. "I'm one of those unknown listeners of Paratopia that listens to half the episodes because, well, I'm just broke most of the time. But I really should try to make an effort to support your... Okay, on and on and on. I was just listening to the Bravery Defined episode." Oh, that's right. That's the one with the Piglet Shameful. The letter continues, "And it has inspired me to contact you to see if you may be interested in speaking with me regarding my experiences. Long history of chronic sleep paralysis, hypnagogia? Goja? Bup. Plus, I've discovered the cure for sleep paralysis. Ha ha. Ha. On and on. Lindsay. Lindsay, huh? So Lindsay was inspired by Piglet Shameful's episode of confronting her demons and having them disappear. That's cool. I'm glad that episode inspired someone. Let's see what she has to say. Maybe I can talk to her now. Just, through magic. Lindsay, if you're out there and you can hear me, my first question is, when you were having this sleep paralysis, did you think it was something normal, or did you think paranormal, or what?
I originally thought paranormal when I first had the experience. But shortly after I had the experience, I found out that it was a sleep disorder, like the next day, because my dad's a doctor, and he's had these experiences as well. So I first had told my mom, and she probably thought, okay, Lindsay's going crazy, because the way I explained it to her was like, well, I felt like a ghost took over my body, and I floated around the room. Because every time I have sleep paralysis, I have an out-of-body experience, which is really bizarre.
But do you actually leave your body?
I don't think, I don't think. I don't know, I can't say. It totally feels like I do.
Well, walk us through that.
But,
I mean, if you, I assume you're asleep, or maybe starting to sleep.
Yeah, I'm lying in bed. Like, I'm physically lying in bed.
And are you aware of yourself When you say out of body, are you aware of yourself in your body, but it feels as though you're sort of floating, or how does that work?
Well, it feels like a full-blown, like, hallucination, like you're floating up. But it's less like floating than kind of like when you have sleep paralysis, it feels like there's this energy kind of running through you. And it starts in, like, you know, your arms or your legs and just spreads throughout. And it's like a feeling, like, I can't describe it because it's like nothing else I've ever experienced.
But when we say, like, I had an out-of-body experience, because I hear this from people who say they have out-of-body or astral traveling or this sort of thing. And then when you actually get into, okay, well, what's happening? Are you leaving your body? 9 times out of 10, and it's not 10 times, but 9 times out of 10, it doesn't sound to me like they're explaining leaving their body at all.
Well,
so how can you not know? I guess this gets to my fundamental question. How do you not know whether you're in your body or not? Like, how does that...
It feels like I'm hallucinating, if it's a hallucination. Like I feel like I'm floating around, like I have the experience. You know, it would be just like I am floating around, like experience-wise. But then, and I'm almost positive, or at least I was the first few times I had it, that I was floating around. But then when you snap out of it, you know, I'm lying in my bed. So it's totally realistic in every sense, you know. You're in your room, you can see yourself floating around, but you...
Do you see yourself lying in bed?
No, which is why for a long time I didn't call it an out-of-body experience, and I just kind of said, well, I float around a little bit. But from what I've come to understand about it, I mean, that's the way they describe it. And within sleep paralysis, they describe it as an out-of-body experience. But
so what is the visual component with this then? When you say out-of-body, do you get closer to the ceiling?
I go all around the room. It's really bizarre. It feels like I'm just being pulled up. Like I get the sense of I'm paralyzed. Like most people, when they get sleep paralysis, they just feel paralyzed and they're lying in their bed. But some people get this, and that's real. Like you're seeing your room, you're seeing, you feel the presence of something. But yeah, every once in a while people have these out-of-body experiences. So for some reason, I've had that since it started. So it feels like I'm not in control, but I'm drifting up and I'm moving around in like random directions. It feels like I'm being like drawn in random directions. Sometimes I'm like spinning around.
We're gonna have I'm gonna start having a sort of a materialist rational intervention here that your dad is not gonna like, because here's the problem. When I just thinking about me and just my own experiences, I can tell you the difference between just opening my eyes right now, dreaming, lucid dreaming. Sometimes you have these sort of hypnagogic flashes behind your eyelids. You know, there are all of these different sort of, if you want to call them states of mind or just different ways of visualizing, I guess. And they're all unique, and you can sort of pick them out and see what differentiates them. But if you're floating around the room, that's not behind your eyelids, is it?
Well, that's what I can't say. You know, I mean, I could say, yeah, it feels like I'm floating around. It could be an out-of-body experience, but like when I first had it, I used to, I'd float around and then it would be like I would land on the floor. It would be like, okay, I'm really lying on the floor, like this really happened. And then I snap out of it and I'm lying in my bed. So it's bizarre. I mean, a lot of times they will, like scientists try to dismiss like alien abductions by saying it's sleep paralysis. I guess the similarity being that, you know, you're drifting up off of your bed, you know, but I've thought about it for years and years and trying to figure out whether it is just a sleep disorder or whether it does have, like, paranormal behind it, something paranormal. And I have to say that I truly believe now, after contemplating this for many years, that it is paranormal. And that's the thing that, you know, I find it hard because, like, science, they basically feel that they have it explained because they can explain what is physiologically, like, happening to your body. But they can't say why, and they say that your body paralyzes itself because it has to do that so you won't move around when you're dreaming. But I have this experience of sleep paralysis sometimes come on when I'm dreaming, like when I'm having an ordinary dream. In the dream, I'll start to feel like the same sort of weight that comes over me. And obviously, before that happened, you know, I would have been, you know, in what they call, you know, paralyzed, so I won't move around in my dreams. But this is something different because it's totally in the dream. You don't understand what's happening, and it feels like you've just been drugged or something. Like, your body just becomes really sluggish, and you're, like, moving around in your dream, like, really bizarre, like you can't control your body. You know, it's like if something was coming after you, you couldn't run, and then it's like I'm pulled out of my dream, and all of a sudden I'm having, you know, an episode where I'm floating around my room.
Have you ever heard voices or seen, you know, entities, people, anything associated with this?
Yeah, I've heard voices, and, you know, I've heard sounds. Sometimes it just sounds like gibberish, yes, and sometimes it sounds like, you know, like static from a radio. And there have been times, just a couple occasions where I've heard voices, just almost like two people talking to each other. There's one time I can remember, just really scary, and that happened, I was probably 16 or so. And so I started floating around, and then it felt like I was all of a sudden going through the floor. And so I was just kind of like dropping down, and everything was dark, and I could hear like laughing kind of all around me. Like, it's really bizarre, and it's really realistic. And as I was hearing the laughing, and then I got down to a certain level, and I could hear like this evil laughing, like almost like your stereotypical like evil laugh. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden I floated back up. And I can't remember what happened after that. I probably just floated around and
just floated around for a while.
Yeah.
New.
But I very rarely have visual like hallucinations. I call it hallucinations because that's just what I've always called it. But I guess, you know, I think there is some reality to it.
Right.
But I can only remember a couple times when I actually saw something, and I think one of the reasons is because I try to block it out. It's just so much and so terrifying that it's almost as if I close my eyes while it's happening, even though technically, like when it ends, I'm open my eyes. So your eyes are closed while it's happening. But within that, I guess I could say what feels like an ethereal body kind of thing, I block it out. And I think of, like, maybe what happened that day, just really mundane things while it's going on, because it's just almost too much. And the feeling of, like, dread and terror is just ridiculous. And I just, a lot of times I block it out. But I did see one time, it was like I kind of floated to the corner of my room, and I looked back to where my bed is. And up in the corner, there was looked like this black mass, and it started moving towards me and then kind of swerved to the left. But when it moved, it looked like, say you see like a herd of, or a swarm, of insects, like moving together.
Right.
It looks like one big mass, but then they're kind of like spreading out and moving in their own direction. So it would look like, like these tiny black particles.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
All like moving together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the one time that I saw something. A lot of times it was very tactile. Like I would feel a lot of times something grabbing my ankles, oddly enough, or just touching your leg or something like that. Or feelings like you couldn't really describe it because it didn't feel human. Like, when it's happening...
Did it feel alive?
You're feeling like this radiating energy, like, going through you, your entire body. And, like, before it starts to happen, I'm wide awake and I can feel it start to, like, hit my, like, arm or leg. I think usually it was my arms. So you'd feel it, and then I'd wake myself up because I'd be like, okay, I don't want to do this. I know what's going to happen. And then it just keeps happening, and you get really, really sleepy. And you can't keep your eyes open. So sometimes it's like I'm like fighting it over and over, and then I just kind of like surrender to it. I'm like, okay, I know this is only going to last a couple minutes, and it'll be over.
Right.
And you're just feeling this... feeling all around you and all through you. That
Lindsay,
it's like nothing. It's really...
Yeah, does it feel alive, any of that, or not? When you say it doesn't feel human.
Yeah, well, the sensations you'll get, like as if something touches you, but it's not like a hand,
Right.
It's like an energy.
And is there...
But sometimes it feels like something physically, just grabbing you.
Okay. Was there a difference that you can remember before you talked about it with your father and after? And also, did he put you on drugs?
Well, no. I found out like the day after I first had it, which is rare for most people because most people go years like wondering what the hell is happening to them. And I was 12, or I was about 12 years old when it first happened. And, like, immediately the next day, like the next morning, I talked to my mother about it. And she obviously thought it was pretty bizarre. So then she asked my dad about it, and coincidentally, he's had the same thing. And, he told me it was sleep paralysis with hypnagogic hallucinations. And so I had that understanding, and I was like, yeah, it's just a sleep thing, but it feels so real. And, I can't go by the reality of it alone in deciding that it's paranormal. The main argument for the paranormal explanation is that the things that people see, hear, feel are so specific and similar. Almost always they feel like an evil presence, and you can't even describe how did you know. You just feel this sense of, it's almost like I'm filled with disgust, and just horror, and it's like a sense of evil that I couldn't even imagine, sort of. And also, like, they'll see the same entities. I don't really see, like, creatures, but, like, the old hag, right? They talk about the old hag, and they actually see, like, an old woman sitting on their chest. And that's a common thing for people that experience during sleep paralysis. And then, like, if you read David Hufford's book, The Terror That Comes in the Night, he describes all these different stories from people he interviewed, and I remember them talking about, they'll see like this person in black with like this certain type of hat and like red eyes, and a lot of people hear footsteps. A lot of people hear like that sort of radio-ish sound, Actually, there's a band called, is it called Dredge? It's like D-R-E-D-G. I think that's how you pronounce it. And they did a concept album that had to do with sleep paralysis. And there's a couple songs where they use, like, sounds, like common sounds that people experience in sleep paralysis. And when I heard that, it was just so weird. Like, it was so familiar.
So have you, well, first of all, are you religious?
No.
So you haven't tried to pray it away?
I mean, I'm pretty skeptical about most things. That's the thing. I'm really rational, and that's why it was hard for me to really come to terms with the fact that I believe it's paranormal. It's hard for me to even hear me say it because it just sounds so weird, you know. Like, I majored in philosophy and read all these things, and I just...
Right.
It's almost like, even like in academia, like unheard of for people to believe in the paranormal or, you know,
yeah, so we hear. But, you know, every time you have a private conversation with these people, it's always like, well, off the record, I'll tell you a completely other story.
Yeah. So I think it was hard to me. I was influenced by that. And when I was younger, I was religious. But
so when you say that you say that you feel like it's evil, then so that I take it you have not tried to pray it away or something along those lines. But is it evil or do you? Well, let me approach the question this way: you have the situation, and when you get the feeling of fear, you think to yourself sometimes, "Okay, I'm just going to give in because I know it's just going to be a couple of minutes or whatever." When you do that, does that make it easier, or does it flow quicker, or something, or is it still scary, the same type of scary that it always is?
Yeah, it's still the same. It's still scary. I mean, I guess the thing is, most people have it a couple times in their lifetime. I guess like 25 in one survey, like 25% to 30% of people will have it at least once in their lifetime. And then some people have it, like, occasionally throughout their life. But I had it, like, 3 or 4 times a week. So it became, like, a really normal part of my life. And I think that's why I became so obsessed with it, because it happened so often. Like, every night when I went to bed, there was, like, a 50-50 chance that I was going to go through that. So...
Has it gone away?
Also, I think a lot of people who've only had it a couple times, like, there's a lot of people you hear who say... their eyes were open and their eyes were wide open. And it feels like your eyes are open, but, I mean, I've had it so many times I remember I opened my eyes at the end, right? So it's just the evil, like the sense of evil is immediate, because in the scientific explanation, they basically say that because you are paralyzed, because you're feeling, you know, this paralysis, that you become afraid, and then you sort of conjure up these images, but it's not that kind of, it's not a reaction to it, it's immediate. You really can't explain it until you feel it, and it feels totally threatening and totally malevolent, and this is without even seeing anything.
Right.
It's just like you open your, it's like you usually, when it happens, you're seeing the room that you're in, and it's like you've entered like an alternate dimension, like some dark dimension of your room.
Well, I'm curious, I've talked to Teokas and Ghost Horse about sort of the Lakota perspective on something like this, because when I first moved here to Hawaii, well, when I first, I mean, it was a few months ago, and it's still sort of ongoing, I've got this sense of, I don't know, someone here, a ghost, I don't know what you would call it, an apparition of or something. And I had asked him about that, you know, what is the Lakota sort of perspective on ghosts and that sort of thing. And, you know, he'd said that basically when you're, let's just say when you're in that other awareness mode, if you're sort of ignorant of how it all works, then it's like you're stumbling into things. And so maybe, maybe those things get upset or whatever, or maybe there are sort of negative energy patterns and things like this. But you just sort of learn where to walk, It's like you learn how to see in the dark kind of thing. And so then presumably it's not scary for someone like him because he can detect what's going on and then figure out what to do and what not to do. Whereas people like me and you who aren't used to this, we just kind of go, what the hell's going on? Oh my God. And sort of walk blindly into a patch of negativity, maybe. Do you think something like that is the case, where we're just sort of ignorant about this whole other aspect of the world that we are embedded in? That maybe our rationalism has sort of blinded us to, I don't know, something that could be manageable? I think that's possible.
Well, I do think that, there's a lot that we don't see and are unaware of. And, we only have so many senses. And I think that it's almost like, say if you're a cat and you're watching TV, you don't really know what's going on, You just see these images, but you can't compute that or understand that the way a human would. And so I think there are things around us that are going to appear bizarre to us, like when they talk about in physics, like a flat land and like a three-dimensional creature in a two-dimensional world, it would seem all weird and confusing. I don't know. I don't know too much about that, so I probably shouldn't.
It's funny. It's funny that you're mentioning that, because it's like every time I see something in physics like that, I always then hear a physicist say, or I've heard in the past or read in the past them say, now so-and-so is going to use this to sort of prove their point about blank, like this. It's like, well, now you're going to use that as the analogy to prove your point about this sleep paralysis thing, as though that's a bad idea. It's like they say these things that have these giant sweeping implications, and then when you try to apply those sweeping implications to something, they go, no, that's not really what that means. It's like, well, what does it mean then? Well, it's nothing. It's hypothetical.
To go into that territory.
Yeah.
Because you'd be, ridiculed. And I think it's crazy, though, that so many intelligent people who are supposed to be fairly open-minded wouldn't even consider that territory. I mean, they don't even spend much time trying to, like skeptics, they spend a lot of time trying to dismiss things, but just within the scientific world in general, like, you'd think that they would be able to at least acknowledge that people are experiencing things that have these strange implications and try to look into it, right? But it's like they just put blinders on and completely ignore that portion of reality.
Yeah, well, I think that they sort of were forged in the fire of the church, and so it's like anything that smacks of superstition or religion or, those sort of buzzwords, I think they just, it's like, whoa, we can't, they see that as, because they're not known rational entities, then they're irrational. And we know what irrationality leads to, the Crusades and, flat Earth and all this stuff. And it's like they still haven't figured out how to differentiate between complete nonsense irrationality and something that is sort of transcendent of rationality. It sort of transcends and includes, but the anchor of it is elsewhere. And I think it scares them because, science as an entity had to claw its way into existence and hide itself and protect itself and all this from a crazy, irrational church.
Yeah, and for so long they had to kind of somehow fit God into their theories. And, or like, was it Galileo? He got in a lot of shit for implying that the Earth isn't the center of the universe and rotates around the sun. And
yeah, and you may not have this problem where you are, but in America, I mean, we've still got the creationists who want to include, well, okay, you can teach that evolution, but right beside it, teach that dinosaurs came here on the 6th day. It's like, oh,
yeah, which is pretty much contradicting the first thing. just leave kids all confused.
So, I mean, I can understand it from that perspective. I can understand the wariness of not wanting to approach a subject like this. But I think that if it is, I think if you're a true scientist, I mean, you've got to sort of look at the evidence, whether you want to or not, you know?
I think if you're a real, like, skeptic in, like, the real sense of the term, like, you are skeptical of everything, even skeptical of that materialist paradigm. Like, you don't just stick to that one way of thinking and then just immediately dismiss things and find ways to dismiss things. Like, you would actually look into it and investigate it and come to your own conclusions.
Yeah. You talked to me about sort of this in the past tense. This used to happen. Does it still happen to you?
Oh, yeah. That's the thing. No, because when I went on antidepressants, it just stopped, which is a weird thing. And I think people would probably say, oh, well, that shows that it's like a scientific thing and, you know, it's just your brain. But I don't think so. I think maybe chemicals in your brain play some sort of role in being able to enter that state of consciousness or something like that. But, yeah, so anyone who's really, really bothered about it, if they, you know, want to get rid of it, that's how you get rid of it.
Well, yeah.
And it's known, but it's, you know, I don't think, unless it's something that happens to you all the time, it's probably not worth it.
I think that, again, is something where it's like a mistaken sort of thing where it's like, well, we can identify these chemicals in the brain, therefore they're the source of this. And it's like, no, again, they're a biological correlate. Like,
yeah, exactly.
everything is holistic, right? So you've got the rational, you've got the irrational, you've got the transcendent of that. And of course there's going to be a rational component. Of course there's going to be a material component to an organism perceiving, but that doesn't mean that that's, you know, that it's originating from that point. I just feel like that is so short-sighted. But so what does your dad say? Have you talked to him about this? About your thinking that it might be paranormal?
I think casually I was talking to him about it, and he's kind of joked around about it, but I just think that he probably, I don't know if he'd be open to that or not. Like, it's funny because we haven't discussed the subject very much, you know. He just mentioned to me that he had them, and a few weeks ago he mentioned to me that he had a sleep paralysis experience, but I'm really not sure. But I think I see what you're saying completely. Like, I think it was in Plato, I can't remember which writing it was in, but there's one point when Socrates talks about how we know, like, when you move your leg or something like that, like, what tendons are moving and what's physically happening to your leg, but we don't know why you move it or why you're able to move it. You know what I mean? Like, they don't know. Can't explain consciousness, can't explain. There's so many unanswered questions, like, even with that. If you can't even explain why we're conscious at all, you know, there's so many things you can't explain. And just that people wouldn't recognize that there is all this unexplained territory is kind of absurd.
I think science is coming up against its limit, which is the point of view, you know, that you can gather from observing everything. And I don't think you can, like, to, you know, gee, what is consciousness? Well, the answer to that isn't going to be in a textbook. It's not going to be examining a brain. It's something that you live. What is consciousness? You're it. You know, it's like, duh. At some point, you just got to throw up the duh sign, I guess.
Exactly.
What is consciousness?
So a lot of people, like, are afraid of even talking about sleep paralysis. I mean, and it has a history, like, you know, it's been happening throughout time all over the world. Like, different places in the world have different traditions and different things they call it. And it's usually always, or it is always paranormal, except for the Western explanation. But before they started investigating it, and before science started completely running away from anything that, had anything that had any kind of implication of the unknown, right?
Right.
So, really, when you look at it, it's a universal thing, and their experiences are a lot alike, but sometimes their interpretations are different. Like, I think in Japan, they call it kanishibari. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Nope.
Oh, and another interesting thing I meant to say is that the word nightmare came from this experience. Because Mara, I think it's Swedish, maybe? I should know that. And it means to crush, like to crush upon. So when people have that experience with sleep paralysis and something is on their chest, right? Like, so it was just like the crusher, right? And then it was nightmare. So that's where the term nightmare came from. But eventually, I don't know how, but eventually it just got used as a term for a bad dream.
Wow, that's interesting.
But I read that in a couple places with like some experts. David Hufford, I think, said it, and there's another guy, Al Shane, from the University of Waterloo. And it's funny because he kind of believes the scientific explanation, right, and he talks about that in his research, whereas Hufford admits that it's completely bizarre and that it seems like, it's paranormal, basically. He comes out and says that. So.
Well, let me ask you one more question. So for Piglet Shameful, who's trying to parse out, okay, this is paranormal and this is a hallucination, what would you say to her? Is that a fruitful exercise or not?
I would say that to not completely, sometimes when people, all right, you go to the doctor and they're told, well, this is a sleep disorder, and they think, okay, well, it's explained, it's a sleep disorder, but when you really look beyond it, you realize that they don't actually have an explanation for it. So I would just tell her to do her research and, make her decision. I mean, you could call it a sleep disorder, like, technically it is, but it's just, what causes it. So I would just tell her to, do her research and just think about it and really think about her experiences and analyze them and just come to her own conclusions. Like, I don't want to tell people to believe one way or the other. Just kind of look into it and see what makes the most sense to you.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for stepping forward and sharing a little bit of your story. And let's try to get your dad on the show, huh?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me. It was fun to talk about this, and I think it's good to bring more awareness to it for people who don't really.
Well, this went differently.
Don't really know what's happening.
I thought that you thought that it was sleep paralysis and that there was a scientific explanation. I didn't realize you had been thinking about it and thought that there was a paranormal connection. So that's interesting.
For sure.
Cool. Well, thanks again.
Well, thank you.
Wow, that was a really interesting discussion. Thanks, Lindsay. Kind of reminds me of a friend of mine who's, I guess he's well known, let's just say, in a particular field of interest, and so he doesn't really even want to talk about this stuff publicly. He doesn't need to. He certainly doesn't need the money or the fame. But man, it'd be kind of cool if I could get him to open up about it in the same way that Lindsay just did. I wonder if I could telegraph what's going to happen next anymore. Without further ado, Paratopia, here is the mysterious... I'm calling him Mr. X, just because that seems like it's either that or Commander X, It's always the cheesy thing in ufology. So I'm going
Reverend X would be fine, too.
Reverend X. All right, there it is. We've settled it. Reverend X. Now, thankfully, you're willing to come on and talk about some of your experiences, because I know that this is not. Well, not only is this not something you want to even talk about, it's not something that you want to be happening to you. You don't want this, you don't need this, and in fact, it doesn't enter your belief system, so you say. Now, I know that you come from a skeptical background on the one hand. On the other hand, you've had a lifetime of, not a lifetime of experiences, but your life has been pockmarked, let's say, by experiences. And I find this to be just sort of the fact of experiencers who come on this show who say, well, I've only got this one-off issue. And then you start delving into their background and it's like, well, okay, there was that time I saw a UFO when I was 5 or, whatever it is. And it seems like you seem to follow that pattern, but oddly, you became a skeptic. Even though you had some of this stuff in your background at a young age, you became a member of a skeptical organization even.
Right.
So here you are now having these experiences again, and I guess let me just set this up this way. I interviewed a gal who had sort of night terror issues, right? And her father is some sort of brain scientist, neurologist or something, who also had this in his life, and he put her on antidepressants, and it went away. But even so, she's convinced that it's paranormal, and that even if you're cutting off the brain chemistry that sort of activates these things, it's still there. That's not the cause. It's not the cause of it. And then along comes you, like not a few weeks later, with this story where it seems as though the old hag syndrome is being used against you in some sort of voodoo magic type scenario. And so I find all of this fascinating. It's like, how did this old hag syndrome just sort of drop into our laps here? So I don't know. Where would you like to begin? Do you want to start with your early stuff, or do you want to just go right into how this reared its head again in your life and sort of called attention to itself?
Well, let me give you a thumbnail of the build-up to it. As a small child, like growing up in the late 60s, early 70s, I was, I guess, what you would call in that culture a monster kid. Famous monsters of Filmland magazine. I grew up with all the creature feature shows. That's what I was obsessed with as a kid. I would get in trouble for drawing pictures of Vampirella. Anyway, I was always in trouble because I was obsessed with monster kid culture, right? And as I got older, I kind of, got into other things and whatnot, but that was something that left a big imprint on me and had never gone away. And of course, I grew up through that whole Rod Serling's UFO, Bigfoot, Devil's Triangle, Abominable Snowman kind of documentaries and stuff back in the early mid-'70s, and the Time Life books, all of that stuff. I'm sure there's 10 million people that have the same background. But as I got older, I got to where I guess when I reached what George Carlin called the age of reason, it's probably around the time I was, I don't know, maybe 20, 21. I pretty much convinced myself that I was an atheist and that all of this paranormal stuff was a lot of fun. It was like reading a comic book, but it was all bullshit. It was fun bullshit, but it was bullshit nonetheless. So, but I do have to backtrack. As a small child, I actually, the first time I ever heard the term UFO, I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. I was a drive-in in New Jersey, and we were watching Willy Wonka or something, and my father pointed up in the sky and said, "It's a UFO." Now, I'd never even heard the term Martian at this point. I didn't know what it was. And there was this thing that I recall clear as day that almost looked like a toy. It was a spinning object, and it was multicolored. I don't remember the configuration of the lights, but it almost looked like a almost like just a toy of some sort floating in the air and spinning. One side the bottom seemed to be spinning from a different direction than the top. There were different colored lights. I didn't know what a UFO was. It just was like a cool thing in the sky. Now, obviously, within a few weeks of that, and I started, asking about it, and I started hearing things about Martians and that sort of stuff. And, of course, this was becoming, or maybe it already was at the time, I don't know, but I became aware of it, the concept of UFOs. But don't ever recall having another UFO kind of experience. So that was probably, and then there was something that my father pointed to something being poltergeistish when I was a child. But then there was a long layoff of nothing.
But did that, just to stop right there, did that affect your interest in any of this stuff, or was it just a one-off, even in your mind? It didn't, like for me, when I had my 8th grade sighting, which sounds amazingly like what you just described, a giant toy spinning in 2 separate directions, multicolored lights, the whole thing. That really set me off on a path of what the hell is this reality about? That didn't do that for you?
Oh, no. At that age, it did, of course. I was completely obsessed with all of that shit. Again, the Time Life books, Man, Myth, and Magic, or whatever the hell they were called, And back when the National Enquirer was still in black and white, back in the Elvis is Dead, well, actually before that. But, when it was on black and white, cheap newsprint, I'd get my hands on that. I think my grandmother it was, or an aunt or somebody used to get them every week. And it was full of that stuff, the Bermuda Triangle and whatnot. So, I dove into it head first. But I was still a little kid. It was like believing in Santa Claus, and so I got a little older and I got into other stuff, and I had one other experience. I was working in a record store when I was probably 20 years old, and I guess you'd call it a doppelganger type of experience. The woman who managed the store had a very specific kind of funny walk. We used to make fun of her bow-legged kind of walk. And I opened the store early, and I was doing inventory. And out the corner, I heard the door open to the mall, to the store in the mall. And out the corner of my eye, I saw the store manager walk in wearing what we used to call her very specific come fuck me dress. This is where she was obviously going to have a date on that night or something. The brown leather dress, and she had a funny walk, and I saw it out the corner of my eye as she came walking in. And I just went back to counting records, or 45s as they were called in the day. And a couple minutes later, the door opens again, or slides open to the store, and she comes walking in wearing khakis. And I asked her, did you just walk out the back door and change clothes? And she said, no. And this blew my mind. And I ran across the hall, and I started asking everybody, did you see Karen, which was her name, not that it matters. Did you see her come in twice? And there was no question in my mind that she came in dressed differently earlier, right? Just a few minutes earlier. That I kind of ran with that for a couple of weeks, and then I threw it away. And, I don't even know where I filed it away to at the time. Or maybe I think I was too embarrassed to talk about it anymore. But around the time that happened, I also recall getting hit almost within the same week or something, hit by what I would call disabling deja vu. Around the same time that happened, everything was deja vu, and it was really bothering me. Like, I went to a doctor to ask them about it at the time, and they basically just told me to take 2 aspirin and call them in the morning. Nothing was done about it, and it went away. So, then, I'm an atheist at this point. Somewhere along the time, in that era, my early 20s, I discovered the skeptical movement. This struck a nerve with me. It in a good way, I guess. It made me feel like I was smarter than everybody. It made me feel like I did when I found out there was no Santa Claus and I had to tell kid in the class. There was no Santa Claus, but it seemed to be, for at least in
You had to tell them.
I had to tell them. I had to, So I just went with that for years. I joined, some of the skeptical organizations. I subscribed to all the magazines for years and probably bought everything the Prometheus books put out, just for years. And that's where I stood. Now, while this was going on, Jeremy, I never lost my fascination with the Bigfoot UFO stuff. I didn't believe it. I would watch it, and I'd watch the same shows a million times, no matter how many times it came on TV. But if people were sitting in the room, I felt compelled to tell them why this was bullshit, based upon everything I'd heard from, say, Joe Nickel or whomever, or Michael Shermer. That's where my head was. So this goes on for years. Now, I've been rambling. Perhaps you should jump in and cut me off.
No, this is good. This is all good background.
So this probably went on for a good 20 years. Now, I don't remember, it's been several months back. I come home one day, and there is a chicken foot, a cut off, like mummified kind of chicken foot, on the front door of my house with a red ribbon on it taped to the door. I laughed at this, I didn't know what it was. I called all my friends and I said, hey, which one of you guys is playing the joke? Ha, ha, ha. But I still didn't care because I had no belief in voodoo or any such stuff. And I was trying to run down my list of people I knew ethnically who may believe in Santeria and things like that. And so I pulled this chicken foot out, and I started showing it to people. It was like a big joke to me. And there were people who were scared to death of this. Of course, I got a laugh out of it. I thought it was great. But there were people truly frightened. There was one place I was working where I brought it in, and I showed the guy, and he was from Colombia, South America, I think. He was somewhere in South America. I brought it in and waved it, laughing at it, and the guy started shoving me out the front of the establishment, saying, "Get that shit out of here." I was really angry, pushing me out. But I'm still laughing and thinking this is funny. No big deal. The only thing I'm wondering is who sent me the chicken foot and why. So that passes. I wake up one night somewhere within a week or two or three after the chicken foot. Now, I'd made no connection between the two, and I'm still not saying there is.
Did you keep the chicken foot?
Yes, I absolutely kept the chicken foot. I kept it in the glove box of my car.
Okay.
I thought it was great. I thought it was funny. I wake up at some point in the morning. I thought I was having a heart attack or an asthma attack. I used to have asthma when I was a small child, and I hadn't had it in forever, but I thought that's what was happening. But it felt like someone had parked their car on top of my chest. And I was dreaming, I know I was asleep dreaming about something else. And when I became aware of this, I opened my eyes wanting to jump out of bed, and I couldn't. And what to my wondering eyes should appear but I guess what you would call the old hag. And in my eyes, the thing I relate it to is reading stories of Baba Yaga, the old Russian witch fairy tale or whatever, when I was a kid. But it was a true old crone. But the scariest, just horrifying, frightening female presence, and it was sitting on me and pressing on my chest. This scared the shit out of me, and I was aware that the TV was going on, and it went on. I can't say exactly how long it happened. It could have been 30 seconds, it could have been 10 minutes, but it felt like forever. And I opened my eyes, or closed my eyes, opened back up, and it went away, and then I was awake. I didn't say anything about it. I just figured I had a nightmare.
Did you have anyone else in the room with you?
Yes, my wife was in bed with me. But I didn't tell her because, of course, my wife knows how I feel about this shit.
But I mean,
you know,
did you look over to her? Did you see her asleep? Were you aware of her
Yes,
in the room? Okay.
Yes, she was asleep, and then it happened. It was either 3 or 4 more times after that. I don't recall precisely, but it happened. It must have been 4 times. It happened several more times, and the last time it was the same thing, and it was absolutely horrifying. I couldn't breathe, and it was like just an ugly old, like the old witch in the EC comics, Crypt of Horror, or Vault of Horror, or whatever the hell. Just a really horrible looking, rotten old woman, kind of undulating on me, almost in a sexual way. You know what I mean? I'm sitting there wondering, am I having some kind of weird wet dream? You know, but I wasn't.
But she's not communicating with you or anything.
No, there's no talking. But so this happened, and I still have not told anybody about it. And you know, sometimes you have you ever had a dream, Jeremy, where within your dream you dreamed that you'd had a dream?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I've awakened and thought, oh, I've had that dream a million times before, and then once I cleared my head in the morning, I went, no, that's the first time that ever happened. But
Right.
within the dream, it was like a hall of mirrors, right? So I wanted to make sure that wasn't what happened. So the last time it happened, same thing occurred. Television was on, loud as hell. I'd fallen asleep. There was an infomercial going on, and I had already resigned myself to the fact that I was going to confront whatever this presence was to try to, just figure out what was happening. So the old hag was on me doing the old hag thing, and I couldn't move, but I was taking very careful note of what was on the television. I was looking at what was on the screen. I don't remember precisely what they were selling, but it was infomercial stuff, Billy Mays type of stuff. And I remember looking at this thing, this presence that was on top of me, and kind of, I guess, because I couldn't talk, and I wouldn't say I was trying to communicate telepathically. And again, I feel like a fucking retard saying this stuff, but that's the best way I can describe it. As I remember looking at her and saying, okay, we're going to play a game of chicken. I'm going to ride this out to the end and see what you're going to do. And it seemed to go on just a little bit longer than previous ones, and it was like I was really just playing a game of stare down, and I wasn't scared at that point. And at some point, I closed my eyes, opened them up again, and she was gone. At that point, I woke my wife up, and I said, did you hear me talking in my sleep? Blah, blah, blah. Nothing. And I said, do me a favor. I said, hit the TiVo. I said, tell me if they were just selling whatever it was. The laundry listed what I just heard. And I walked out of the room, and she ran them back, and it was exactly what I heard. So so when that happened, I told her, I said, you're going to think I'm crazy, and I feel strange telling you about this. And I explained it to her. She asked why I had not told her. And I said, because you would think I had lost my fucking mind. And it's against everything I believe in. It would be like, the Virgin Mary showing up in my room.
Well, although, because you're part of a skeptical organization, I mean, you must have heard of sleep paralysis and old hag syndrome in scientific terms, yeah?
Yes, and that is precisely how I started. That's when I started looking into it. I said, okay, this is sleep paralysis. I got online. I started looking into it. Old hag, I forget the name. Was it Myra, something? And I started calling a couple of very close friends of mine and asking them about it, if they were familiar with it. And while this was going on at a place I work, I told the bartender at joint about it. A girl walked in within a week or so of this happening, and he looked like he saw a ghost, literally. And he started pointing at the girl, and I didn't know what he was trying to reference. And he took me to the side, and he said, you need to listen to her. And I said, what? He said, it scared the shit out of me. He said, she had the exact same thing happen to her that you did. And it was. She had the same story, the old hag type of deal. And she didn't know what to make of it. And at the time, I told her, well, it's sleep paralysis. And I went into the whole thing about how, well, this is how alien abductions happen. I did whatever, the whole scientific explanation of how this could happen. But what sort of shook my faith, or lack of faith, if that's the right way to say it, was that it was so technicolor and clear and HD right in front of me. It wasn't hazy. It wasn't like even if you tried to recall a dream, a very vivid dream, it's still not, like having a conversation with somebody face to face. There's still, at least to me, a hazy dream quality to it. This was wide open. So I tried to write it off as sleep paralysis and it being a very interesting anomaly in my life, And I even, because I think James Randi, a couple of arch skeptics, had similar, not that same kind of story, but where they would say they had experienced something paranormal and they had their scientific explanation for it, otherwise. They said they could see where your brain can play tricks on you, and that's where I filed it away. And then more came. I'm going to shut up and let you talk for a minute.
Well, I guess my only question so far, because I feel like you're actually handling this really well. Do you remember what the old hag was wearing? I mean, do you remember the details of this thing? And then when you spoke to the woman, did she have the same details of the same creature?
The hag was, from what I recall, just like a black kind of cloaky thing. It was more the face and kind of feeling breath on me. The face was just, I don't even know how to describe it. It was scary. And I'm not scared of many things,
I know.
but this thing, it terrified me. It was just the most hideous. There aren't even words to describe it, which is why it shook me to my core.
And so the other woman, or the woman that you spoke to in the bar, or wherever it was, did she say that she saw the same face?
She didn't see. She said she felt a female presence, and she said that it was, a dark figure on her. And she could tell it was a woman, but she didn't, if I remember correctly, she didn't have details on the face, but it scared the shit out of her. And then when we compared notes, it was kind of a weird, and then that set me off on the deep end of going against everything I believed and then held to be true. And I started listening to, for example, your show and Tim Banal and things like this, because I was looking for answers, and I was listening. Obviously, there's what I call the crazy Art Bell crowd. You can tell the people who are, at least I think I can, who are either schizophrenic or on drugs or seeking attention. And then there's the people who sound completely rational and, who have been the ones who aren't the ones that fascinated me were the ones who, like me, didn't say with certainty this is exactly what happened. They said something very fucking strange happened to me and I can't put my head around it. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's the kind of stuff that made me go, wait a minute, there's somebody else who's intelligent and, who's not trying to sell a book or anything, who's had a very disturbing situation.
In fact, I think you gave me probably inadvertently probably the best compliment on the show, which is you said in listening to Paratopia, you wondered if Jeff and I were actually doing a sociological experiment and didn't have any of these experiences. I thought that's kind of a huge compliment in a way.
Well, yeah, because it's, again, I mean, I can read between the lines, but there was, you guys, and you guys have talked about some crazy, I mean, the craziest shit has been stuff other people have talked about on your show, more so than what I remember you guys talking about, toilet elves and things like that. I remember hearing, but you know, you guys, you didn't sound insane, you know, and you didn't sound like, you know, you were making bucks off of it or anything. And I did wonder, are these college kids? You know, is this an experiment? Are they going to write a paper on it? You know, are they throwing bullshit out there to see who writes in? And even I told you when we had spoken, the first time we spoke, you know, I had to wonder if psychologically, because I was trying to look at all the angles, did something in me turn on and say, you know, like, was I trying to unconsciously fit into some sort of subculture, you know, and with, you know, and I didn't know. It was very weird. And then, like I said, then I had a couple more after that really made me wonder what the fuck was going on.
Right. Well, let's get into those. So you've had the chicken foot, then perhaps related, we don't know. You have the old hag syndrome. You start looking into the old hag syndrome. You can't go to your skeptical friends with this, obviously, although I wonder if you would have them, some of them at least, sort of secretly pull you aside and go, you know, don't tell anyone this, but I've had X happen to me. I've had Y happen to me, but I don't want to talk about it, you know. I just wonder.
Well, I had one friend who I guess I would consider to be skeptical. But no, I wouldn't say he wasn't skeptical like I was. He was still, you know, open to mystical, into Carl Jungian type of stuff. You know, he was open to stuff like that. But he was the one I figured was most intelligent. He wasn't going to be a fundamentalist skeptic. He would at least listen. And, you know, he told me he had some weird stuff, but he'd never had that happen to him. So after this had passed, then I'm sitting in my house one day, within a week or two, I forget precisely now, of the old hag thing passing me by, and I've already filed that away, and it's a case of sleep paralysis in my mind. Then I start hearing little voices wanting me to let them in, like kids. Now, I think there are some asshole kids outside, you know, whatever, you know, scratching around on the window. And I get up several times looking for it. Now, this is bothering me. Now I'm thinking I'm hearing voices.
This is like straight out of Salem's Lot at this point.
Well, that's exactly, I told you that earlier, because that weird freaked me out for a few days. And so, you know, I was typing in all the things that I heard, right? I didn't see anything. I never saw anything. I just heard very clear voices. I heard them when I was in my car at a stoplight. And I look all this up online, and I said, oh, okay, for whatever reason, I'm having a replay of the vampire kid at the window in Salem's Lot. You know, that whatever that scene was. If for those of you who don't know, go back and watch Salem's Lot from 1978. Anyway, so I figured, you know, again, I was trying to reduce everything down as to where it came from. But this went on for several days, and I was in the shower one day, and the same thing. I heard the voices, and I was in the shower, and I was thinking, okay, I must be going crazy, but I'm not. But I know rationally there are no little children running around the house. And it was like malevolent, naughty little children, just giggly, creepy bullshit. And I jumped out of the shower real quick, you know, and obviously nobody was there. And I said, okay, say you've been hit in the head too many times or something. And as soon as I get back in the shower, then I hear more giggling, you know, like they're playing hide and seek. That eventually went away. You know, but even then, I tried to write that off as, you know, that maybe I had gotten emotionally or mentally in a place once I opened that door of even wondering that maybe I allowed that to happen. And
but see, you're in a real bind with your belief system, because it doesn't matter what tact you take. Like, even saying that goes against, all of the sort of debunker bones in you, doesn't it? It's like, well, just the notion of opening a door by perception and letting something in. There is no good answer. There's no good answer for you.
Yeah, and I called all of, once, this had gone on a little while, there was a small handful of friends, that I talked to all the time, and I would tell them about the crazy shit, and then I would very intentionally not discuss it for a few days, and then out of nowhere I would ask them, by the way, do I sound crazy to you? Am I saying anything else to you that sounds bizarre beyond that? And to a man, they would say, well, no, there's really no reason for you to be making this shit up. And knowing how you are and the way you've been for years, it's certainly not the kind of thing you would do. So we're not, we can't tell you, obviously, that you had a paranormal experience, but we can tell you that you believe it, and that's really where I was with it. And so then I talked to my buddy who I told you, the guy who was into all the Jungian synchronicity type of stuff, who then put it together for me as, after he'd gotten the third story, he said, this is voodoo. And I laughed because, the chicken foot really did nothing to me. It was just something funny. So then he started, putting it together and saying he talked to people and he was talking to psychics, at which point I laughed at him. I said, you're talking to fucking psychics. He said, yeah, this woman can talk to you. And I said, yeah, and she wants to charge me $300. Fuck her. I'm not falling for that. But he laid out some stuff where he said, this is classic voodoo stuff. And I believe, and I could be wrong, Jeremy, because when I spoke to you about this, I'm pretty sure I laid this out, and you may have said a similar thing. I might be confusing things here. But that there's the relationship of it kind of follows a curse sort of pattern, whereas my mind is saying there's no such thing as a curse. But then once that gets opened up, then I'm thinking, holy shit, did I get the chicken foot that led to the hag that led to the little kids? So then that opens a big gaping wound in my psyche, which really has me against the ropes. And and I'm skeptical as hell. Okay? And the reason I'm talking about this is I'm just curious. I don't want my name out there. I don't have a book to sell. I don't want emails from anybody. But I would be interested in hearing if there's anybody else who's had similar stuff happen. Because as this happened, then suddenly I get all this synchronicity shit going on in my head. It was insane. Just crazy stuff. And it's almost, and my friend used this term. He said, perhaps, I forget how he said it precisely, but something like, you've torn open a hole in the fabric of something, or basically you open the curtain a little bit and let something in. And part of me the skeptical part of me is laughing at it and going, ha, 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 yeah, that's good for one of those bullshit shows on A&E. And then the other half is making me just wonder what exactly is going on. I don't know. And if it is a mental thing or a short circuit in my brain, I would love to know that. And that would be fine with me. If it's that, I would like to go get the proper medication or something to fix it. Look, it's not a 24-hour-a-day thing. And I had one other experience.
Well, hold on. Before we get to that experience, let's just go back here for a second, because when we talked, I then dug up a friend who also doesn't want to be identified, who does know a thing or two about voodoo and Santeria and all of that. And so he gave you a prescription to get rid of this curse. And it worked, yeah?
Well, yeah. I have to qualify that, because you had actually, you were kind enough to send me the prescription for this. And I don't recall the precise prescription. Something had to do with white sage, which I could not find. But when I was first given it, it had something to do with about ringing a bell until it was clear. Was that the one it was about, another guy gave me another
Yeah, I don't remember
prescription
what was in
to
it.
get rid of it. But one person told me something about ringing a bell until it was clear, and I said, are you out of your fucking mind? I'm going to have my neighbors watch me walking around my house ringing a bell, and it's, burning incense or whatnot. But I guess when you gave me that, I was still in the midst. It might have been when the kid thing was happening. But we went with the assumption that if it is the chicken foot, let's just see what happens. And that's right. I remember whatever the prescription was you gave me, for lack of a better term. I think I did not have access to white sage. But the end of it was to say this, do this, mix a little of this and that, and then throw it into a body of water to get rid of it, I believe. Again, I might be amalgamating the two things that I was told by you and somebody else. But I did get rid of the chicken foot. And I would say for a month or two, I had nothing else happen. So the part of me that's a skeptic says, well, it was a nice bit of psychodrama. And if you emotionally had something going on that made you see things that weren't there or hear things that weren't there, this was just like the sort of psychodrama ritual you needed to make it go away. And then the other part of me that was kind of uncomfortable was a nagging part of me that said, is it possible? Is it fucking possible that really this stupid chicken foot led to this, that led to this, and until you did the mumbo jumbo over here, it didn't go away?
Well, here's the other thing that sort of links it to the chicken foot or a curse of some sort that I guess we both forgot about is that, like you said before, you're not afraid of a whole lot, but the two things you can't stand or creep you out or whatever are children and old women, right?
Yes, exactly.
Or children and witches, maybe.
Yeah, well, yeah, of all the horror archetypes, a witch is scary to me. In fact, one of the scariest things in recent, last 15, 20 years I can recall, which a lot of people may think is stupid. But do you remember when The Blair Witch came out? They did a prequel to it on Sci-Fi TV or something, The Curse of the Blair Witch, which was a mockumentary that was really, from what I recall, I haven't seen it 20 years or however long it's been, 15 years, but it was really well done. And there was a creepy element about it. I don't know. There was something about the old witch archetype that to me is scary. You could send Jason and Freddy after me and I wouldn't care. I'd pull out a gun and shoot them, But there is something very deep about, the old woman, the witch archetype that is disturbing. Now, children to me are not scary. I don't know. For lack of a better term, what we're just going to call for right now for the sake of discussion, my paranormal experience with children, that was creepy. But in general, I just don't like kids. You know what I mean? Kids have no manners these days. They're all assholes.
Right.
And they're like wild apes. I don't like them. I don't want to be around them. I don't care. I don't find them charming. The two things that I really kind of disliked the most manifested themselves in that way, which again is interesting because even if it was something else going wrong with my wiring, I find it fascinating that those two things are, the way that it revealed itself to me.
Well, did your friend who kicked you out of his establishment or any of the people who were freaked out and who knew what this was, did any of them say specifically what was scary about it? I mean, did they say this is a curse where your most frightening nightmare is going to come real? I mean, did they tell you any of that?
I got two different stories. Okay, the guy who threw me out of his establishment he was just saying, "You're cursed. This is black magic." Blah blah blah. And he was completely irrational. I was laughing at him. I mean, I called. I said, even when I brought it up to him days later in front of people, he was very upset about it. But it was like the kind of thing he didn't want to talk about it. I brought it up to another girl, a girl that I know from another establishment. She said it was a good thing. She said that it was she claimed that, this is why I'm so uncomfortable talking about this, because now I feel like an asshole on the Art Pal show. What this girl told me, and she's a civilian, she doesn't walk around with chicken feet around her neck. She claims that her husband, I think she said, either husband or uncle, was some sort of Santeria guy. And that because this chicken foot had a red ribbon on it, she said that was like a love spell and that it was a good thing. But the other guy said it was bad. And, and trying to look this stuff up on the internet, there doesn't seem to be any real consensus on what it is, other than a chicken foot equals mojo going on of some sort.
Okay. So now let's fast forward to your latest experience. Just tell us about it, and then we'll dissect it a little bit.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's quick and simple. I'm driving down the road, and again, see, now this is why I didn't want to talk about this shit. Because I'm just driving down the highway on my way to work, and a man walked out in front of my car while I'm doing 60 miles an hour. I pulled the wheel hard to the right to the point to where my wheels actually come up off I'm in an SUV. They came up an inch or two. Ran into the grass on the other side, almost caused 2 wrecks. I thought I hit somebody. Car came behind me, asked me if I was okay. I was in total shock, like strained the muscles in my neck, pulling the car to the side. Ran over to make sure I didn't hit anybody. Nothing. Nobody's there. And the only thing and when I went straight to work, I said, "You're not going to believe this. I just hit a ghost," right? And I said, "Yeah, never mind. I know it's stupid. I've lost my mind. I ran over a fucking ghost." Now, and then I told you about it. And I swear on my father's grave, I don't know if I told you this since the last time I spoke to you. According to, and just what they told me is true. I don't know if there's any, but I was not aware of it. Some guy was walking down this road on almost precisely the same place. This would happen on a Wednesday. The Wednesday before, now I found this out 2 weeks after what I'm about to tell you happened, a guy was walking down the road and got hit by a car in the same area. And it was a hit and run, and they haven't found him yet. Which I thought, when I was told that, I was like, okay, hi, you're playing Ghost Story with me. And then I looked it up, and yes, that in fact did happen, which then again made me go, okay, what the hell is going on here? And it's very uncomfortable for me because it's against everything I've known and believed. And I mean, even Jeremy, I'm saying, okay, now I'm seeing, I've had 1, 2, 3 paranormal things in the span of 4 months, whatever it's been. Right. So then I'm saying, okay, this is like UFOs in Mexico, if you know what I mean. It's like, oh yeah, everybody sees a UFO in Mexico. Bullshit. Or at least that's how I see UFOs in Mexico. I think it's bullshit, because there's too many. There's too many happening at one time. And it's, which is, again, why I'm not comfortable talking about this shit, but of course I am. Just because I'm trying to figure it out. I don't even want to talk to a shrink about this, Yeah. But I don't know.
It's okay, Reverend X. You're in a safe place now.
So now, and I wonder if it's because now suddenly I'm listening and absorbing all this stuff from my childhood again, I'm diving back into Bigfoot and UFOs and all the podcasts and stuff. And the running joke in my house is that my wife says, "You will not," well, she goes, "Do you know how crazy it is walking in the room?" She said, "I walk in and out of the bedroom." She goes, "I walk in one time, I hear Bigfoot. Next time, Chupacabra, Shadow Walker, or whatever, Skinwalker, whatever." And it's a running joke in the house. And I'm telling, and I really am wondering, is it possible that somehow I've listened to so much of this shit that somehow I've hypnotized myself? I don't know.
You're making Paratopia tulpas or something. We've had people...
Yeah. Well, and you know what? That's right, because now some other folks I talked to, just as a side thing, and I don't know, I'm certainly not a, whatever you call it, a Ghostbuster or whatever. One possible explanation for those things that happened, the women and the woman and the kids, were tulpas, to the degree that, if it exists, if there is such a thing as a tulpa, it's kind of a rational explanation if they exist. And if not, I don't know. But, and that's the thing, because once you open this can of worms, it's like deciding how far down the rabbit hole you want to fall,
Yeah.
Because there's a million crazy, insane I'm sitting in my car right now. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I can turn on my radio, and I'm sure I'll listen to George, what's his name? Is it an Angel Nori or whatever? And there'll be somebody crazy talking about crazy stuff, and, I can buy into that, or I'm at a loss for words.
I'm going to give you a proposition, which is,
okay.
Well, before I do, let me ask you, nothing at all happened between, 20 years ago and now, or whatever it was?
Not that I recall. I'm sure that nothing huge.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. There are certain aspects of your life that are, by any definition, anti-structural, right? And so Here's my question. Do you think it's possible that you had this stuff, for whatever reason, you're open to this stuff, to seeing it, maybe it's in your family, they say that bit, you and your dad, something. You're open to this stuff in some way that you decided to handle it by becoming a skeptic and other things, in these various ways that are, almost like two negatives make a positive. It's like you've got this anti-structural thing happening to you, and then you choose an anti-structural path or paths in life. And I almost wonder if that's not a way to block it out. It's almost in the same way as confronting the old hag head on and saying, okay, I'm going to keep my eyes open and ride this thing out and see what happens. It's like in your own life, you decided to sort of play that role. Well, I'm going to adopt, this certain thing and play this out with no fear. And I almost wonder if maybe that was a good cover for a while, but then somehow almost, literally magically, this thing comes back into your life and is, it wants to be perceived.
Well, yeah. Well, see, like when you ask me a question like that, it's weird because it almost feels like you're picking a scab, and that's the only way I can describe it, because it's almost, yeah, that's possible, and it's kind of like I don't want to think about it. I don't. Please put the Band-Aid back on my paranormal boo-boo. Let's, but and that's the thing, because I don't have an answer. I don't know if the shit was real. I don't know if it wasn't. I do know that I'm not crazy.
Right. But what do you feel? I mean, you can't know these things, but when you're sitting alone with yourself and you're really being honest with yourself, what do you feel is the cause of this?
Well, I guess what I feel in private, which isn't private anymore now, except for my name, is that because this shit has been so real and technicolor, the 3 experiences in recent months, that there may be something, some sort of force that I can't put a name to, but that there may be something out there. There may be, I don't know if it's, what do you guys call it, a trickster? I'm open to the idea that there may be things out there that we can't understand, and I wouldn't be quick even saying that to say you can call it a ghost or a tulpa or a poltergeist or whatever the hell you would call it, but there's something that seems to be very real.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know what to call it. I don't
because there's something that's real, but is the presentation that you're perceiving real? That's the problem. Because it's really
Right.
easy to jump, like you said, to jump to the conclusion, oh, that's a ghost, that's a UFO, that's a this, that's a that. But it's like, but the more you look at it, how do all of these things have, all these odd similarities and not be emanating from the same source? And
Well, when you ask me that, as I've been doing my armchair research into this, I hear people say that certain people put forth the opinion that whatever these experiences are, that they manifest themselves into what's culturally relevant to the person perceiving it, so that maybe if, for example, somebody in Mexico who had that same, let's just say this force or presence exists, if I was in Mexico, I'd see it as a bunch of UFOs, but UFOs aren't in my, I think they're cool, as science fiction fodder.
Right.
But maybe whatever it is presented itself to me in a way that was relevant to me, to make me feel it. And again, this is like the kind of stuff that makes my head explode when I start digging too deep into it. Look, when I start talking about this shit, it's like, to me, it would be like somebody talking to me about string theory. I start opening too many doors, and I don't want to open them too much. I would really like to have a hard, fast, clinical answer. And if somebody could come to me and say, yes, this was a tulpa that bothered you, or old hags or ghosts that come in the night or whatever, and we can prove that, and that's okay, I could deal with that and be prepared for the next time it happened. Or if somebody said, you had a concussion, and this is what happens when you have concussions, sure, I could deal with that and file it away. But it's a weird place to be. I don't know.
Well, I don't think admitting to having these little episodes is going to mean that you've got to go buy a woo card anytime soon. I don't think you have to join the woo woo club. I think you'll be okay.
Yeah, but it's strange, and like I said, there's all the freaky people that are full of shit that you can hear, and then there's that handful of people that seem to be earnest, that will say, these things have happened to me, and I don't know what the hell they are. Let's talk about them. You know what I mean? That's the thing. And, I'm sure there are probably groups where people get together and wear tinfoil hats around here where I live. I'm sure there are probably those in every state. And I don't want to sit with those people, the people who have already made up their mind that this is what happened. But coming from my place where I was in my head, it would be like if, I'm still very much an atheist. You'll never convince me, that a zombie came back to life off of the cross and is, saving the world. That's not going to happen. I don't ever see that changing. Okay, but then the other thing is, I go, okay, well, if all this other shit's possible, maybe that is. But I still, I can't cross that Rubicon and get there. It's. I don't know. Look, how many times have I said I don't know? 70? I don't know. But I'm just interested in have other people come from the same place, from that hardcore, skeptical, this is all bullshit.
Well, here's what I'll do. I know what you're saying. We, we've got a message board and we've got a Facebook page, and our Facebook page is what people are primarily interacting on now. But resurrecting this episode, I'm going to ask everyone to go back to the message board who's had this type of experience, and to write there so that you can, the good Reverend X, can go and look at it and just see what responses are, because. The interesting thing to me is that we've had a good number of listeners say that they needed to take a break from this show and from other shows because they feel like listening to it does amp up paranormal activity in their lives. But I can't recall if any of them have ever come back and said, yeah, that did the trick. You know, turning this stuff off turned it off. So
right.
I'd love to hear from them.
Remember, I think it was on your show that I heard you. What was your co-host, Jeff Ritzman? Was that his name?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think it was on your show. I heard you guys, or maybe I heard it somewhere else, saying that when you start diving into this shit, then it opens things up.
Right.
And I have wondered that myself. You know, if I put this in a little box and put it away for a while, you know, does it go away, or do you make am I making myself more prone to hallucinations for reasons I can't figure out because I'm listening to this kind of stuff? Or does being open to it, you know, make it manifest itself in some real way? I don't know.
Well, maybe some people will have some good feedback there for you. Is there anything else you want to add? I don't want to take up too much of your time, and thank you again for doing this because, like you've been saying, I mean, you don't even want to be talking about this. Yeah.
How many, okay, just off the top of your head, how many experiences of various types, I don't know how many different kinds of experiences you've had, how many have you had, and does it seem to you like they snowball? You know, is there a snowball effect, or does it go away for 10 years and come back? And
yeah, there does seem to be that for me. It doesn't. It seems. How many have I had? I don't know. I mean, it's if you're paying attention, there's a lot. You know, but do they matter? You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of little things that aren't even worth mentioning on the show, and they start to add up. But I think that there are both timelines going on. One, it seems that there are certain periods of my life where activity is heavy and then it dies off. But it also seems to be true that when we, even in doing the show, doing that episode with Colin Andrews, I don't know if you listened to that or not, but where we were really deeply into the subject and then it spilled out into the room and, you know, shut down computers and I became a vegetarian and, you know, just all this weird shit happened around that episode. There seems to be that element, too, of when you're deeply paying attention and deeply discussing that triggers it as well. So I think I've seen it both ways.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely there seems to be some sort of cause and effect relationship between the diving into it. It's just I don't know whether or not it's, you know, it's a chicken or the egg thing. It is, in fact, what's going on the more I dive into it real, you know, and that's the thing it's just perplexing. If you would have interviewed me a year ago, I would have played Michael Shermer with you. You know, I would have been very polite, and no matter what you said, I would have had a cut it off at the head answer for it. You know, I would have been able to put a neat little bow on it and throw it in the garbage bin and move on. And because I guess what's that old saying? Don't judge an Indian until you've walked a mile in his shoes. Mm-hmm. Well, my hush puppies have some wear on them now, or my moccasins too. And it's you know, if nothing else, as weird as this may sound, I think it's kind of made me a nicer person. Not that I was a dick. I think it's made me have more empathy. Maybe, you know, like I'm certainly not as dismissive of this kind of stuff if I hear somebody talk about it. I mean, again, you always hear somebody.
To even hear you say, I had to tell the kids Santa wasn't real. I had to be the one. The power trip that you get, the sort of, you know, that egocentrism that comes with being a member of the skeptical community. I mean, how many skeptics are that self-aware? And were you that self-aware then or as a result of this?
No, it's definitely as a result of it. You know, because I went back after all this stuff started happening. You know, I'm a big Penn Jillette fan. right? I love Penn Jillette. I think he's a smart, funny guy. And, I love this show Bullshit, right? But I went back and I started looking at it, and I looked at it through a different lens. Now, I would still say probably 85% of what they call bullshit on, I agreed with. But then there were other times where he did something I noticed that the hardcore skeptical crowd did, which is it kind of turns into ad hominem attacks, just straight out the gate, to where instead of Penn saying, well, this is why this guy's wrong because this and that, he'd go, and this is what this asshole has to say. Like, well, wait, how do you become an asshole? He didn't even, and it made me look. My lens filter changed a little bit, and so then I started going back and looking and reading. I've got just God Almighty a room filled with this stuff, and I started going back, and you can see it's not the skeptics. The skeptics, to them, it's like a religion. And they defend their religion, not all the time, I'm saying, but I mean, I can see where there are points where there are chinks in their armor and they're not really necessarily using a scientific or totally open viewpoint, that you can tell they have their mind made up ahead of time. And they may be right, but just they're going into it the wrong way. And so now I just look at stuff differently, I mean, I have a pretty good bullshit detector. And, of course, that's the thing that's freaked me out because my bullshit detector didn't go off on myself,
Well, I think that's a good place to leave it now that it's like 4 a.m. where you are. So, yeah. Thank you again. And I guess, like I said, just people go to the message board and leave stuff. Leave your testimonials for the good Reverend here to look at. And I actually think that this is the benefit for us in this is, my God, whoever hears of a skeptic who has had this change happen to them.
Yeah.
So, I really appreciate you coming on and gritting your teeth and doing it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you listening to my I don't even know what term to say.
Your crazy schizophrenic life, yes.
Yes, exactly.
Hi, this is Dr. Kirby Surprise, author of Synchronicity, The Art of Coincidence, Choice, and Unlocking Your Mind, and you are listening to Paratopia.
What the world is watching with their ears.
Gosh, all this dream talk. It's interesting. It's interesting how it all comes together as if this episode is just sort of organically growing into its own thing. I mean, those two stories, they bookend each other perfectly, don't they? You've got these two skeptically minded people having these night terror issues. It's, they don't know what's going on. They wonder what's going on. They study up on it. It doesn't seem to matter. The issue is the issue, whether you know about it or not. No matter what book you read, it's still there. I wonder if the people who write the books on these things have them. There seems to be a huge discrepancy between how the experience feels to the person going through it and what is actually said about the experience in scientific literature. But what do I know? I'm just a drowning podcaster. Jeff, where are you? Well, I can't find Jeff, obviously, but, my friend Melissa had a dream recently that might have been something more than a dream. And her story involves a mysterious Reverend X, as it were. So another theme is developing here. I wonder if I wish for it real hard, she'll just appear before me like a phantasm and tell the story. Paratopia, it is rare, but it happens now and then where we have these experiences that start off in dream time and land on the floor of reality in the wake state. My good friend and friend of the show, Melissa Reed, has had such an experience recently, and she has agreed to share it with us. And I think it's pretty damn amazing. So, first off, welcome back to the show, Melissa.
Hi, Jeremy. Great to be with you. And it's just wonderful. I'm grateful to be here tonight. Thanks so much.
This story is particularly interesting because it starts with you moving. You're actually going from North Carolina to L.A., and it's your first time in L.A., from what I understand, yeah?
Yeah, I never had a desire to see L.A. ever in life. But, I was leaving North Carolina to move back to Hawaii, 19 years since I lived there. And as you know, of course, we each lived in the New York City area for many years, and not coincidentally, perhaps, we were each of us moving to Hawaii. And I was going to be staying with an artist friend of mine from Manhattan who had moved to L.A. for a few days before I headed out to Hawaii.
Okay, so take us back. It's the day before your last day on the mainland, yeah? It's sort of your last night, then you've got another day to tool around L.A., and then the next day you're going to get on a plane, you're out. What happened 2 nights before you left?
Yes. One more full day on the mainland before I go back to Hawaii after 19 years. Out of the blue, as it were, I had a powerful dream, lucid dream / vision. When I woke up in the morning, I felt that this experience was, I use a phrase in my life, that it was not my own. There was a message in this dream experience.
Okay, so tell us about the dream.
So I am walking into the foyer of a large theater. It certainly seemed in the dream that it was an old theater. It had history. There's an air of history about it. And as I go through the doors of the lobby into the main auditorium, suddenly I lift up as if I am free floating or flying. And with an effortlessness, I felt that I was incredibly light and I could control my movement. And as I float around the main auditorium, I'm quite aware of the color of the seats. They were red, like a red velvet perhaps, and outlined in ornate metalwork. And I did get a sense more clearly that it was a vintage theater. It was a dated theater.
When you were floating around and looking at this stuff, was that the point of it in terms of the dream? In other words, as you're telling us the details, are you just remembering the details, or were you to take in all the details, and that was the point of seeing them all? Like, were you in a theater and you were going, okay, that's red chairs, that's gold, seat covering, all that sort of stuff? Were you picking it out in the dream specifically like that?
I was. I was pretty clear, pretty mindful. I was in observation mode, if that makes sense. Okay. And then all of a sudden, I decided to bring myself down to the floor. And the reason I decided to do that is that I had a growing sense of anticipation that there was a very powerful individual who was a great guide or teacher, who was highly anticipated in the theater. I didn't sense that there were others around me, but I sensed that there was, as if there was an energy of interest that this being, this man, was about to appear. And so my excitement grows, and I turn to the back of the auditorium to some sort of doorway, sensing that he's going to come from that direction. And as I grow in anticipation, I have all of these incredible questions that I'm wanting to ask of this being when he shows up. All of a sudden, the doors open, and there's an entourage, if you will, people, and this man, this being, sort of in the center, leading the crowd, and I go up to him, and I see his face very distinctly, and he's swarthy skinned, very high cheekbones, an arched nose, very distinctive, strong nose, and almond-shaped, Asian-like eyes, dark-haired, and had an instant awareness of how powerful his energy was, as if his energy was larger than the room itself, almost. And I immediately go into... He stands still. He hesitates there at the door as question after question pours out of me. And the first question had to do with focused intent. And how is it that I could just bring myself to fly and float? How is it that I could bring myself to come back down to the ground, the earth, just through thought? And so I asked him about that, and he's listening, not so much answering. And then I went into a series of questions having to do with what's to come and what is reality about, and none of these questions were answered, but he seemed to be wide open and very inviting in how he listened to me.
Was there something fulfilling about that in the dream, or did it feel unfulfilling because he wasn't answering anything? I mean, it's a dream, and so, there could be this abstract sense of fulfillment even if ultimately you're not getting an answer.
I felt like I was in a flow, in the flow. I felt that I was meant to be there, that everything that was taking place felt complete. And so, perhaps in a way, I felt that everything was what I needed, even though I did not get direct answers. Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't just that you were getting something off your chest and that felt good?
No, I sense that in my own awareness and in my life, in this dream, I knew that asking questions didn't necessarily give me what I needed for highest purpose.
Okay.
Now I must say, one of the most important components to this dream experience was his name. And I was told as I stood there with him that his name was White Horse.
Who told you this?
Vague figures. It's as if that didn't matter. It's as if the name came through me, if that makes sense.
Okay, so it wasn't like he said, my name is White Horse, and it wasn't even maybe that you heard the name being said in the room. What was the context of saying the name? What was the point of saying the name? Was it just being said, or was there a sentence around the words?
As you asked me the question, I realize that even though I heard his name is White Horse, I already knew that his name was White Horse. And that was all I needed to know. And it's as if in knowing his name, perhaps I also had all the information that I needed as well.
Okay. So is that basically it for the dream, or was there anything else? Did you just wake up, or did you just go to the next dream?
No, Jeremy, it was, for me, in my pattern of lucid dream guidance over the years, dreams that are messages or, let's just say, information that needs to create an awareness in me, if you will. They are usually very early in the morning, and as I wake up, I'm in that sort of state of deep meditation as it thrusts itself up into my memory to carry forward in the day to come and in fully awake state.
Okay. So then that was the end of the dream, and you woke up. Now it's the next day, and you are presumably going to do some touristy things around LA. And where do you end up?
Yeah, well, it's my last full day on the mainland, incredibly enough. I'd been staying with a special friend there, an artist friend there in LA, and she was living right below the Hollywood sign, which I came to understand was sort of the neighborhood to tour around in. I knew nothing about LA. And I ended up going up to Hollywood Boulevard that day. The next morning, I was to leave for Hawaii. And I had sort of an urge to go see a particular movie.
That would be The Apparition.
I had an urge to see a particular movie called The Apparition. I didn't know much about it. And since I found out that it was playing at Grauman's Chinese Theater, I was, wow, oh boy, I'm going to see the old movie theater, and go see a movie there. So I'm just having fun walking down Hollywood Boulevard. I come to Grauman's Chinese Theater, and all of a sudden, when I get there, I just instantly have the feeling that I need to take the walking tour of the history of the theater and not bother with seeing the film.
What? The apparition isn't enough for you? You need to... No, I totally understand not seeing the apparition.
To this day, I really don't know what that movie's about. Okay, yeah.
Spoiler alert, it's about an apparition. Go on.
No, hey, how could you resist taking a walking tour of the Grauman's Chinese Theater, the very essence of the history of Hollywood? How cool is that? So the tour was about to start, and I'm standing there, waiting for the tour to start and other people to show up, and there was just this one other fellow with me for the tour. So it was me and this guy and the wonderful young fellow that was excited and happy to take us on the tour. So we go in. And, okay, so I'm just in total tourist mode, just feeling excited about being there and how fun it is to be there, right before I get on the plane for Hawaii, and that's all that's in my mind. I had set the dream aside, let's say. The moment the doors opened, it was incredible. It's a very strange, surreal place. The decorations are unusual in the way it's laid out, and of course, I'm no expert on the history of Grauman's Chinese Theater, but the owner, Mr. Grauman, in the 20s, had a passion for Chinese motifs and even philosophy, I believe. So that's, how the theater's laid out. Well, anyway, so we go through the door, and as we head toward the main lobby, it just hits me, there's sort of a, everything's sort of red. Red is a key color, certainly an important color in China, in Chinese history. And as we're touring around, and the young guide is excitedly sharing everything with us, off to one side, I see a sculpture, and as we're walking around, he guides us in that direction. And as a hallway to one side of the front foyer, and he's sharing all the fascinating stories about the theater and all the stars that have had adventures and even mishaps there in the theater. And then he takes us down this hallway, and we stand before this life-size sculpture of a man draped in a black sarong-like robe. And I look up at the face, and all of a sudden I am thrust into the dream of that morning. The face of the sculpture is the very face of the man, white horse, in my dream vision. And the guide proceeds to share with us that this is a sculpture of the great philosopher, Chinese enlightened being named Lao Tzu. And immediately I'm reminded, I remember a phrase or a thought from Lao Tzu that I'd been carrying around in my mind for the last year or so. Mind you, I know nothing about him. I am no historian about Lao Tzu, but I have a great affinity for Asian cultures as an artist, and I guess as a person on a personal spirit journey. The energies of Asia draw me. And this is not the direct quote. It's sort of distilled in my own mind to accomplishment in non-doing. And this is just reverberated in my mind for a good year, knowing that it came from Lao Tzu. And out of the blue, from somewhere, this just came my way. And, it's a core energy for all of us, for anyone to contemplate. And it's been a comfort to me. Anyway, so as we are standing there, I'm in shock. I've never had an experience like this in my life. The face was so clear in the dream experience. I remember in the dream very distinctively just standing there and taking in the face. And there I am at Grauman's Chinese Theater, of all places in the world, the last place in the world I ever thought I would be, in LA, and there, and the many folks, and many of you listening know LA well. I never thought I would ever be there. And there I am doing what I was doing in the dream. I'm standing before this figure, taking in the face and contemplating a bit of wisdom from Lao Tzu, perhaps similar to the way I was contemplating the energy that exuded from this being in my dream with the name of White Horse. And so we continue on. And from that moment, I knew that something was unfolding that was far more than just a Hollywood tour. I was guided to be there, and I started to truly tap into my mindfulness and to truly pay attention to everything that was being said, but every movement being made, and even the fact that there was only one other person with me on the tour, and the way I was feeling, doing my best to be in observation mode to see what was taking place. Now, the tour guide said, well, I am enjoying taking you both around so much that I know I can trust you. I'm going to let you take a peek as the movie wraps. It's about to end. So if you're very quiet, you can stand at the back of the auditorium and watch the movie. And so we did just that. So anyway, we're standing there. This has been, the movie I thought I'd go see. And I'm just blown away because it's a really a dark, dark statement. I guess we caught maybe 8-9 minutes of the end of it before the credits rolled. And I really don't know what it's about other than, of course, the title speaking to what the theme must be about. And there's a young woman. It seemed to be that she was on the streets of a big city, probably New York, and everything was dark and menacing and kind of otherworldly, and there were tents on the street. It seemed that's, of course, many of you may have seen the movie, so I don't know for sure, and she takes refuge. She finds the tent she wants. It's very intense. Takes refuge there. And so then the guide asks us to step away for a few moments so that the audience can leave the theater. As the lights go up, I look around in complete shock because I had no idea, as I'm watching the end of the movie in total dark, that this auditorium is literally what I dreamed. The seats are red, like in my dream. The curve, the shape of the auditorium, and the ornate work around the chairs, etc. Even the heavy drapery, the front curtain. And I'm in shock yet again, and I'm just doing my best to pay attention and listen to the larger energies perhaps speaking to me. Just then, the tour guide says, again, I have so enjoyed having just the two of you. I know that I can leave you here alone. We usually don't do this. But if you'd like to enjoy the theater a bit and wander around on your own, I'm sure I can trust you. Not to take any pictures, just enjoy. And he walks away. And so, walking around a bit and still just having a blast, being there in this incredible place of wonderful fantasy and history. I was looking around, then all of a sudden I just feel inclined to talk with the man that I am on the tour with. And we're standing there, and he's a kindly person and rather open. And so we have an enjoyable intro together. And I tell him that this is my last day and never thought I would be here in LA like this, and I'm moving to Hawaii. And we seem to share some things in common, interest in food, what have you.
She's being purposely vague because she doesn't want to give away his identity. So let's just get that out of the way. All right.
All right. Let's get that out of the way. Okay. Oy vey. So we're standing there talking, and he tells me that he's in the military, and immediately, and these days, I just immediately go into this sort of state of respect for anyone in the military, knowing what they're dealing with now in the world. But I start to kind of wonder about his work and continue to get a strange feeling that this was set up for us to have a dialogue, standing there all alone in the auditorium. And I say, well, I hope your work is going well. How are things in your life and what you're doing in your work? And he says to me, I shouldn't share this with you, but I feel that I will. I'm here for a special gathering in Los Angeles with other members of the military, and we're going to be discussing, well, it's rather like a think tank, certain threats that are growing. And I immediately go into a state of being very in tune, if you will, with what he's sharing with me. And I know that there's more going on in this conversation than perhaps either of us knew. And so I asked questions in that state. I asked, may I know a bit about the work that you're doing and what this is about? He shares with me that they're meeting to work to counteract online computer systems collapse, perhaps, that would affect the grid, the national grid. And national is my word as we're speaking here. The collapse of the grid, meaning the power grid, the infrastructure. And he elaborated a bit about the different folks that were coming together to troubleshoot this issue, this possible event or events, including scholars, PhDs, high-tech experts from various universities, mentioned university people, and how they were all brainstorming together with military peoples. And I seem to remember that he alluded that there were different groups meeting like this in different places at different times or
around the world.
Yeah. And I asked, is this looking inevitable, that we're headed in this direction? And he intimated that this seems so. Okay? We talked a bit for a while about the challenges with which we're living in the world today, and caring about each other and how important that is, creating community made of compassion. And he seemed as passionate about such things as I myself am. He was a good-hearted soul. I distinctly remember that. And now we need to start to look at this in a larger way. This whole situation was playing out on a larger stage, that I was perhaps to come together with this man, be alone in the auditorium at Groman's Chinese Theater, and have this dialogue. As I've been sharing with you, and as you and I, Jeremy, have discussed it, And then we did a little research about the phrase white horse and found out a little bit about Lao Tzu. I'm just amazed at the different components that are coming together to paint a larger picture, the hints of things that are showing themselves to me. As we know, dreams are multi-layered guidance systems, perhaps, and it takes effort, and it takes creative thinking, and an incredibly active, or let's just say, we need to put into action our sense of the intuitive as we interpret dream situations. And there is often powerful information in the subtlest of things. And so some of that subtlety is starting to show itself to me as we dialogue about all of this. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly the White Horse stuff takes this out of the scary realm of Alex Jones, and, you know, the sky is collapsing and, you know, into this fuller sort of sense of reality, of what it really means to maybe go through something like that. So we'll get to that in a sec, but just one more question. Did you have the sense that when he was talking about groups around the world, that these were all, you know, sort of American think tanks around the world, or that they would be just other countries having this discussion amongst themselves?
Good question. You know, I don't want to make any assumptions here, and I don't want to I do not want to create the energy of conclusive awareness about any of this. This is a sharing with you in the audience. And then each of us has to go with it. Each of us has to go with everything we're taking in now in the world, you know, and make of it what we will according to our own personal guidance systems. All right. So that said, yeah, I got a sense that there's certainly more than, say, this one gathering going on. Yeah. I do want to go ahead and interject something not specifically related to the questions we're talking about right now, but I realized that in the dream experience, the floating that I was experiencing, I rarely have had this in memory in dream experience, but of being OBE, out of body. And I really feel that the floating that was taking place in the dream scenario was my literally being in the theater, perhaps even that night, OBE, out of body. And it's just like a fascinating thing for me. And, you know, perhaps part of the energy to set this whole scenario up for me to, you know, just get ready for it, if you will. So.
Okay. So now we turn our attention to the importance of White Horse in all of this. And essentially, we just did a little Google search, Lao Tzu and White Horse. What's the connection? And if you do that on your own, you're going to find a whole bunch of web pages coming up with the same story. It turns out Lao Tzu had a favorite story that he loved to tell about a white horse, and Melissa is going to share that with us now, and then we'll talk about it.
Hey, thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, I'm going to share this wonderful fable that was considered to be Lao Tzu's favorite parable. This story happened in the days of Lao Tzu in China, and Lao Tzu loved it very much. There was an old man in a village, very poor, but even kings were jealous of him because he had a beautiful white horse. Kings offered fabulous prices for the horse, but the man would say, "This horse is not a horse to me, he is a person, and how can you sell a person, a friend?" The man was poor, but he never sold the horse. One morning, he found that the horse was not in the stable. The whole village gathered, and they said, "You foolish old man, we knew that someday the horse would be stolen. It would have been better to sell it. What a misfortune, the old man said. Don't go so far as to say that. Simply say that the horse is not in the stable is the fact. Everything else is a judgment. Whether it is a misfortune or a blessing, I do not know, because this is just a fragment. Who knows what is going to follow? People laughed at the old man. They had always known that he was a little crazy. But after 15 days, suddenly one night the horse returned. He had not been stolen, he had escaped into the wild, and not only that, he brought a dozen wild horses with him. Again the people gathered, and they said, "Old man, you were right. This was not a misfortune. It has indeed proved to be a blessing." The old man said, "Again you are going too far. Just say that the horse is back. Who knows whether it is a blessing or not? It is only a fragment. You read a single word in a sentence. How can you judge the whole book?" This time the people could not say much, but instead they knew that he was wrong. 12 beautiful horses have come. The old man had an only son who started to train the wild horses. Just a week later, he fell from a horse and his legs were broken. The people gathered again and again. They judged. They said, "Again you proved right. It was a misfortune. Your only son has lost the use of his legs, and in your old age, he was your only support. Now you are poorer than ever." The old man said, "You are obsessed with judgment. Don't go that far. Say only that my son has broken his legs. Nobody knows whether this is a misfortune or a blessing. Life comes in fragments, and more is never given to you." It happened that after a few weeks, the country went to war, and all the young men of the town were forcibly taken for the military. Only the old man's son was left because he was crippled. The whole town was crying and weeping because it was a losing fight, and they knew most of the young people would never come back. They came to the old man and they said, "You were right, old man. This has proved a blessing. Maybe your son is crippled, but he is still with you. Our sons are gone forever." The old man said again, "You go on and on judging. Nobody knows. Only say this, that your sons have been forced to enter into the army, and my son has not been forced. But only God, the total, knows whether it is a blessing or a misfortune. Judge ye not. Otherwise, you will not become one with the total. With fragments, you will be obsessed. With small things, you will jump to conclusions. Once you judge, you have stopped growing. Judgment means a stale state of mind, and mind always wants judgment because to be in a process is always hazardous and uncomfortable. In fact, the journey never ends. One path ends, another begins. One door closes, another opens. You reach a peak, a higher peak is always there. God is an endless journey. Only those who are so courageous that they don't bother about the goal, but are content with the journey, continue just to live the moment and grow into it. Only those are able to walk with the total. Thank you.
No, thank you. So, I think that is take a breath, will you?
Yeah.
Get a glass of water. I think that is, to my mind anyway, in hearing your story, that is the proper context in which to listen to this. Is the grid going to go down? Are these things going to happen? I mean, we've talked about this stuff on the show before, some great change coming. We all feel it. We all know it, whether we can articulate it or not. And so the question is, do you judge that? If it happens, can we say anything other than it happened? We can't know what's unfolding, or we can't know why things are unfolding. We can only know that they are, because we don't know what that schematic is. We can see things in fragments. We can say, this happened, this happened, this happened. We can't say, this happened, therefore this happened, and so, now we know whether it was a blessing or a curse. That part of it we don't get to know. But I think the subtlety there is that when you live that way, when you walk that walk, that is walking the walk of the totality, and that person, I think, probably does get to know. But in any event, that's not helpful to us here. So I think what is helpful to us here, again, just my takeaway, is not judging, is simply remaining in that non-judgmental space as you see these things unfold before us. What say you, Melissa?
Yes, my dear Jeremy. First, I want to say it's just great to share all of this with you, as we wrestle about. It's great to know that we're not wrestling around alone. We're sharing, all of us, and I appreciate sharing with you. I'm going to use the hackneyed phrase "blown away." I'm blown away that you found this parable that is a favorite of Lao Tzu's about a white horse, and I'm dreaming White Horse is the name of this man who is Lao Tzu, the sculpture, at the Grauman's Chinese Theater. And for me, it just deeply resonates that we were to discover this story, this wonderful teaching to guide us. I feel so strongly that we were to find this to guide us. Difficult things are unfolding. We know that, and we can't color that in pretty colors, perhaps. But
what do you do with it? And
what do you do?
It is.
What do we
do? Here's a good way to approach life from that angle.
What do we do? That's the core question. What do we do with it? Perhaps in this fable, and everybody, look it up for themselves to read it again, because there's so much here. Simple words, but powerful layers of meaning. And I underlined things here, and of course I'm looking at a piece of paper. Whether it is a misfortune or a blessing, I don't know, because this is a fragment. Who knows what is going to follow? And so in a great sage's life, a being who has become enlightened simply surrenders into the fragment, surrenders into the two things, misfortune or a blessing.
Well, I think what I'm gathering from that is when you surrender into the fragment is the now, right? So you're surrendering to the now, and when you say fortune or blessing, you're projecting. So you're projecting a meaning, and you're also projecting a future. It's like this is going to mean good consequences, this is going to mean bad consequences, and then you live along those lines. What happens when they don't come true, or what happens when they do? It just serves to anger you, or it serves to reinforce an illusion. It all goes back to the living in the now, and I think it's important to really feel what that means in a time of what feels like upheaval or feels like unsure times, increasingly unsure times. I think instead of worrying about what comes next or what does it all mean, maybe you just sort of die into it and feel what it is like to be in this fragment of a moment. In a way, this reminds me of is when I'm out swimming, as I was not just the other day, and the tide is really rough. And if you look up and you see the waves coming at you, it's scary as all hell. But if you're, I'm snorkeling, so if you just stick your head underwater and are in the ocean, when you're in the ocean, there's no sense of being scared because that thing isn't going to rip over you or You're just in the ocean. It's only when you're looking for something to crash at you that you get scared. I don't know. It's just something to think about, I suppose.
No, that's a fantastic perspective. I'm trying to articulate an evolving feeling here. I know through my personal experiences when if there are messages that have come through me over time in my life, hand in hand with perhaps specific message energy, is always this incredible grace that's enmeshed in the experience that speaks to larger compassion, to surrendering to one's inner guidance. And this is something that each of us has to study for ourselves, find the personal language of inner guidance. And if you completely fall into the wave that is your inner guidance, you have transcended fear. You have dissolved fear. Fear bubbles away and goes off into the ocean and dissolves. And this is the core. I think Jeremy and I wrestled with how to share this information because we wanted it to be clear and unadulterated. But I think in each of us, we understand how incredibly vital it is now to live lives that come from a place of such inner knowing that fear has nowhere anymore. We're listening with a clarity in each breath, in each step that we take now. And if more and more of humanity lives that way, no matter what may be coming, no matter what the misfortune or the blessing may be, we will be standing there in a state of grace, and we will be okay. We will be infinitely okay. Now, a couple of other beautiful thoughts from Lao Tzu, I think, would be good to share right now. Lao Tzu said, "If you are not afraid of dying, there is nothing you cannot achieve. Knowing others is wisdom. Knowing yourself is enlightenment." And one that's a favorite of many of us, I think we've all heard this one. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. But again, and I hope I can make this a little bit more clear, what's vitally important in this experience that I'm sharing is not even the dialogue with the military man, but the beautiful guidance through the white horse Lao Tzu connection. This is where our power is, in that thing that's so deep and large and personal within us that we will do well no matter what happens in the world. I hope that resonates. I hope it makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still here meditating on the waves crashing over me thing, because I feel like that really, to me, when I noticed that, it's like that is sort of it's a little tweak that changes you, because you realize that either way you're in the ocean. Either way you're swimming in the ocean. It's just that from one perspective you're scared because you see waves coming at you. From another perspective, you're more at one with the ocean because you're in it, and those waves don't affect you in the way that you are afraid they're going to. And I think that we have learned, if nothing else, from Paratopia, that life is systems within systems within systems. It's fractal. And so that very physical act that anyone with access to an ocean can do is the same as the metaphor. and it is the same as, if you want to say the spiritual metaphor, it's all the same. It's just different ways of expressing it. So that's the story. What more need be said? Anything more need be said?
Well, let me again. Lao Tzu can do it better than me, and some other good, great ancient bumper stickers from Lao Tzu. He simply said, "The greatest treasures are simplicity, patience, and compassion." And here's another beauty. Mastering others is strength. Mastering oneself, true power. So in this world where it seems as though so many are doing everything that they can to master others, perhaps the best thing we can do is discover how to master ourselves. So thank you, guys, and aloha nui loa. I wish you well, and magic.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I'll just ask you one final question in closing, and I think the answer is obvious, but it might be worth asking. Did you feel that this was personal for you, or did you feel that you needed to share this with the world?
Wow, that's really a question, Jeremy. Well, that because I've been so overwhelmed moving back to Hawaii, and I kind of shelved the experience until I shared it with you. I feel like I had an experience kind of unlike any I've ever had. I mean, if any of the audience knows, I'm an artist, and I've done a series of works about healing in September 11, and that was something that was being shared. I needed to get out there. This is a curious experience, and I sense with the intuitive self that your feeling that you needed to get it on the air was my guidance. That's telling me that it needed to be shared thanks to the dialogue with you. So I think it remains to be seen. It'll be its own creature. How's that for a thought?
Well, very good. All right. Thank you again, and mahalo.
Mahalo.
Man, what was with all those crickets? Anyway, I hope he didn't give the impression that this mysterious, military informant was of the typical nonsensical persuasion. Just to be clear, she wasn't hiding his identity because he's any bigwig. It's just that he told her this stuff, and he shouldn't have, maybe. So she's protecting it, but I don't think he's telling us any huge secrets. In fact, by now, I think the secret meeting is out because was it John Podesta or one of these guys recently talked about the grid shutting down being, the biggest immediate threat, be it from cyber terrorists in Iran or what have you. So my guess is that guy was at this meeting, and my guess is that this meeting, again, I don't want it to sound like it's some secret government clandestine thing or of the Illuminati persuasion, because I really think it's a think tank that meets around the world at various locations like most of these things do. When I used to work as a receptionist for a billionaire, those guys, people in that office were on all sorts of these think tank panels and right-wing propaganda machine gatherings, that they would have all around the world. And so I think this falls into that category, not obviously the right-wing propaganda machine, but of just being a think tank that meets at various locations. All of this is to say, I would hate to leave listeners with the implication that that somehow Melissa stumbled into the Smoky Man from X-Files or something, and we're exposing some great government secret or, anything along those lines. I don't think that's the case here. But all of that aside, really, who cares? I think the White Horse message is, wow. I mean, after this last week of the East Coast being flooded, I think we need to hear that now more than ever, don't we? And be it cyber terrorism or Mother Nature, I don't think the grid going down is too preposterous a proposition anymore. I mean, man, and all of this in the span of a week, so very interesting. My thanks again to Lindsay, to Reverend X, and to Melissa Reed. And if you want to see some of Melissa's artwork, you can always go to mreedartworks.com. Reed is R-E-E-D, so M-R-E-E-D, artworks, all one word, .com. Thanks, gang, for answering the call, coming on the show, and helping me find Jeff. Oh, wait, they didn't help me find Jeff. Jeff, where are you?
Jeremy Vaeni, how are you, sir?
Jeff, you're alive! You made it! I knew this was how you became the smoke monster. I just knew it! So glad you made it. So glad you didn't die in that crash. What is it you want to talk about? I mean, we got all the time. Actually, you know what? Hold that thought. We're out of time. Good night, everybody.